우리가 미국 이민 생활을 하면서 불행하게도 불의의 사고를 당할 수 있습니다. 또 심지어는 아메리칸 드림을 일순간에 잃어버릴 수 있는 대재앙이 될 수도 있습니다. 한인들이 겪고 있는 몇몇 가지 사고의 사례를 통해서 소속 전문 변호사인 노승훈 변호사로부터 어떤 보상이나 배상을 받아낼 수 있을지 알아보겠습니다. 노 변호사님 안녕하십니까?
네, 안녕하세요.
예. 제가 듣기에는 이제 최근에 PG 카운티에서 한인이 운영하는 그 세탁소에 차량이 불진을 한 바람에 큰 피해를 입은 사건이 있었던 것 같습니다. 어떤 사건이었는지 한번 대략적으로 설명해 주시죠.
Sure. We do have several cases where Korean business owners suffer business injury or business damage. In this case, there was a car, it went out of control and it crashed into our client's business, not only causing damage to the entire business itself, the storefront, but also the people working inside the store. So with that comes several issues of personal injury and business injury, rehabilitation and business compensation. And again, we have a lot of Korean business owners who suffer this type of issue, and it's not just from someone who loses control of a vehicle. This could easily happen when there is a pipe leak. This could easily happen when there's mold inside of a business. This could also happen when there's flooding or ceiling damage. And what happens to a lot of Korean people in our community is that they don't have the proper coverage, not only to repair the store, but to survive financially while the store is being repaired. So, that all gets back to proper consultation, proper insurance, and proper preparation for the worst possible injury or accident when you own something. And in this case, again, there was a vehicle that lost control. It crashed into our client's business and essentially injured 3 people, damaged the equipment, and for all intents and purposes, the business will not be able to run for at least 6 months.
우선 그 세탁소 주인은 아무래도 이제 프로퍼티 오너라기보다는 거기서 이제 비즈니스를 하신 분이기 때문에 인명 피해, 좀 자신이 입은 그 퍼스널 데미지, 그 인주리 같은 데 대해서는 어디를 상대로 어떻게 보상을 또 배상을 받아내야 됩니까?
It always becomes such a complicated web to figure out. Essentially, for the bodily injury, it's going to be claimed against the driver. It's very rare that a random driver will have enough automobile coverage to fully compensate the bodily injury, the business rebuilding, and things like that. So number one, the first process we have to go through is to make the auto claim, and that will initially cover everything. When that falls short, you have to rely on the business insurance. Now, I know most people in the community know this, but when they actually enter lease negotiations with a landlord, there's always a premises insurance clause. It requires, typically for small businesses, anywhere from 1 million, 3 million coverage to 5 million, 8 million. So in that type of situation, what we have to go through is the secondary or supplemental claims process. And that's like anything else. Even health insurance has supplemental claims. Premises and business damage also has a process for supplemental claims. So in this case, after we exhaust the driver's policy, we'll be looking into the business coverage for additional compensation for the business repair and the loss of business, the loss of finance during the repair period.
거기 피해자에게는 인주리나 또는 그 프로퍼티 데미지보다도 평생 그 직업을 비즈니스 할 수 없는 그런 로스가 더 심각할 수도 있는데 그거에 대해서는 구체적으로 어디를 상대로 어떻게 보상을 받을 수가 있습니까?
And that's the greatest loss. Typically people can get rehabilitation, get their medical needs addressed, while the business is still running. But when the business is unable to run, the landlords typically have no liability. So it's up to the business owner to figure out a way to make sure that not only he can be reimbursed for the medical injuries, but for the financial injuries as well. So that's why these leases and landlords require separate business insurance. It covers the entire premises. So in this case, the litigation will have to involve the extent of injury to rebuild, the extent of financial loss due to the fact that the business owner is going to be unable to operate the business for at least 6 to 8 months. So there is a separate claims process, there's a separate litigation process for that.
보행 중에 이제 차에 치인 또 사고를 당한 우리 한인이신 것 같은데 어떤 사건이었습니까?
Regarding pedestrian incidents, in the Korean community, it's interesting that we set up communities as a culture in this area. Meaning, in Annandale, there's a high population. In Ellicott City, there's a high population. Centerville, there's a high population. So the injuries that we see in the Korean community, they come in groups. So we get a lot of numbers of the same types of incidents and injuries. What we're seeing right now is because, for some reason also, when the world came back from COVID, it almost seems like people forgot how to drive. So mixing that with a high, dense population really has resulted in a lot of automobile vehicle to pedestrian accidents. And these are accidents where we see individuals walking in a parking lot and they get hit by a car. We see individuals crossing the street and you see just people in traffic not looking out for them. We see individuals walking maybe later at night when it's darker and you have drivers who are unable to see them or who don't pay attention, causing accidents. And those accidents usually result in the most severe injuries because it's just a person getting hit directly by a car. The injuries can be extremely severe. We also have another client, he is a law enforcement officer. He was hit by a vehicle that was moving at a very high rate of speed. He instantly lost the use of both of his legs. So, the injuries can be extremely, extremely severe. I think the general rule is that you have to make sure that you're not at fault in any way. And that really comes to something very serious in this area only. Maryland, D.C., and Virginia are one of the only few states in the entire United States that follow something called contributory negligence. And what that means is, if you have even 1% fault in an accident, you can't sue anybody, you can't collect anything. It's very different in everywhere else. Like California, they have something called comparative negligence. And what that means is, if you're 80% at fault and I'm 20% at fault, I can still get 80% from you because I still have medical bills, I still have injuries, I need to go to the hospital. And again, that makes the Maryland, D.C., Virginia area one of the most difficult areas to litigate for clients. And that goes a long way to how our firm has established itself, because at its very core, we've always been a team of litigators. And the lesson there is to understand that if you are a pedestrian involved in an accident, you have to make sure that you are not at fault at all. Even the rule about crosswalks. If you're at an intersection and you're crossing the road, you have to cross inside a crosswalk. If you're 1 foot outside of a crosswalk, that could be the difference between, the person who ran you over claiming that, well, you're 1% at fault, so you can't collect anything. And that's absolutely true. That litigation also becomes extremely difficult, especially in this day and age when a lot of people who did witness an accident, they run away. Nobody wants to be involved in it as a witness, nobody wants to help you. So we really do encourage people to be very careful when they're out in public. If you're crossing the street at an intersection, you have to make sure you're in a crosswalk. If you're crossing the street at a public parking lot, you have to make sure that you've done everything you can not to jump in front of the cars, not to come out of a random area. And I know we've all seen this too. We're all in a Costco parking lot, we're all in a giant parking lot, and people don't care. They're on their phones, they just pop out between cars. You know, it's when you have situations like that, you really stand to get a serious injury. When a car hits you, there is a lot of weight and speed. People always fall to the ground. They hurt their hips, their arms, shoulders, and there's the typical falling scenario where when you fall to the ground, your head snaps down. So we always see neck and concussion injuries too. So just understanding that, we really need to have our community aware of the rules of the road and what you can and cannot do. We also see a lot of situations where recently we had an elderly person in the community walking across a large parking lot in front of Korean Corner, and she was just hit from behind. So she wasn't even struck by the vehicle, she was hit by the side view mirror that was sticking out so far. It was a large truck, but because she was elderly, and the way it hit her, she lost complete balance and she completely fell, fracturing her jaw and her nose and her face. Now, the argument there was that she shouldn't have been in the middle of the road. And they did try to argue that she was 1% at fault. That was a situation where this was not in this immediate area. It was about 2 hours away, way down south in Virginia. The initial attorneys that she hired quit the case, and no one else would take the case. And she had a nephew who was actually a very good client of ours, and they came to us begging, hey, please look into this case, is there anything you can do? And of course, you know, the moment we looked into the case, we saw how dangerous and how weak of a lawsuit that would have been. That truly was a situation where we were able to help with our resources, with the way that we investigate cases, with the former police officers and the police investigators that we have on staff. We were able to develop a case. We were able to, with our reputation, really initiate effective litigation and get something for that client. This is a case that nobody wanted to take. But again, it was difficult for her because she also was a little bit at fault, allegedly, right? I would never admit that, but it made a difficult case. I just think the message there has to be that we really need to be careful in this area, especially. Remember the 1% rule, and remember that that's a huge defense for anybody if you're trying to sue them. Whether it's a car accident, a pedestrian accident, or even if a car were to lose control and come into a business, right? There's always a 1% rule, and I think we need to be very aware of it to protect not only our rights, but our body, our health, and our family members as well.
말씀 들어보니까 우리가 피해자가 되지 않기 위해서는 당연히 먼저 무단횡단은 하지 마셔야 될 것 같고, 또 주차장 같은 데서도 피해자는 물론 가해자가 될 수도 있으니까 그것을 위해서는 단 어떻게 보면 이제 횡단보도나 주차장 같은 데는 속도를 거의 내지 말고 조심해서 운행을 해야 될 것 같습니다. 근데 그거를 1% 폴트가 없어야지 된다 그러는데, 그거를 만약에 그런 사고를 당했을 때 그러면은 폴리스 리포트와 또 변호사님 같은데 바로 연락을 해서 도움을 받는 게 더 그 증명을 해야 되니까 초기에 그때는 어떤 조치를 취해야 된다고 보십니까?
Absolutely. No matter what happens, contacting an attorney and starting a case, your case, properly is the most important thing. Too many people worry about the police report, and you have to remember that a police report is helpful. It's always helpful. But the police didn't see anything. All they're doing is writing down what you say or what the other person says. And a lot of times it works to the disadvantage of people in our community because English is not their first language. And a lot of times what happens is the police officer, if they're not able to speak or understand a Korean-speaking person, they may opt to believe the English-speaking person first. And you'll see that the police report actually reflects more of the other person's story compared to, the Korean or non-English speaking person. So the police report is very important. But number one, you have to contact an attorney. Again, we've had plenty of cases where the police report completely put our client at fault. And I think a lot of attorneys as well don't understand the difference in what a police report's value can be and how it can help you or hurt you down the line. We've gone to litigation many, many times with a bad police report. Because at the end of the day, I don't care. The police officer can only say that he came to the accident scene, where the car was, and how the person was looking, whether they were injured, broken arm, whether they called the ambulance, things like that. They can't tell you how the accident occurred because they didn't see it. And quite often it helps because, okay, well, this is what this person said at the time, but that's not the truth. Because we found other witnesses to prove that this person was lying. Because we have our client who you didn't interview. We have and it makes the officer look like they're not doing their job properly. Oh, well, I got to the scene and this person couldn't speak English. Okay, but you wrote the report anyway. Yes. Oh, you didn't bother to contact the person later with somebody who could speak their language. No. So it makes them come off lazy sometimes, and you have to use that to your advantage. It creates a lot of extra work. It creates an amazing, complex system of processing and investigative work. But that's what we do for our clients. But again, getting back to the short answer, yes, you need to make sure your case starts properly. To do that, you do need proper advice. You need an attorney who knows what they're doing. You need their guidance immediately. The police report is important. That needs to start off as quickly and as accurately as possible. And if there are mistakes, we'll help you get involved in contacting the officer, re-interviewing about the accident, and correcting the police report. And that starts off the whole next array of things that need to be done, such as contacting the insurance adjuster and making sure that the claim is properly filed.
경찰에 신고를 해서 경찰이 와도 어떻게 보면 언어 문제 때문에 우리가 피해를 보는 경우가 많이 있는 것 같아요, 한인들은. 그래서 말씀하신 대로 가장 먼저 한인 변호사에게 접촉을 해서 처음부터 엉뚱한 피해를 당하지 않도록 해야 될 것 같습니다. 오늘 도움 말씀 고맙습니다.
고맙습니다.